Alright guys, so just real quick, kind of in the background of working, obviously if you have a question about Revit, we can answer it in person too. But a couple of things, just because Gerardo had a pretty good question today, so I want to share that with everybody. And a couple of others definitely had some good questions that I realized I kind of just forgot last time as well. So a part 4, right, or maybe just kind of the bonus extra, if you will, of this Revit project. But we'll go ahead and let that open. Some Revit template. It's funny, in the office, like, Revit is equally as slow. Honestly, a really good computer too. Like, just opening Revit for some reason just takes a long time. Like, whether it's bad computer or a good computer. And very often, you get into the office, you click on Revit, go make coffee, go to the restroom, go do all this stuff. You come back, it's still not loaded. Like, but it has gotten better. Keep in mind that was like in 2016, but oh my God. That's almost 10 years ago. Anyway, but a couple of things I did want to mention that I didn't get to or just kind of maybe forgot about was just a few things. So one of the questions came up like, can I do like a glass wall, right? And you definitely can. In fact, I've already loaded one. It's called a curtain wall, right? Which is much more like a commercialized term for sure. You wouldn't normally put a curtain wall in a house, right? Or even really probably call it a curtain wall. Even like in a fancy mansion or anything, you'd probably call it glazing. You'd probably just call it an ultimate slider. Very often, especially in my case with those multi-million-dollar houses, very often a client would want, I mean, like a 7-panel 10 by 8 glass sheets of just, I mean, we're talking like $900,000 door, right? To basically go against this entire wall. So like, how would you do that? Well, you'd have to find that component in BIM or something like that. However, in studio, we'd often fake things, or maybe you just want something that's maybe fixed glass, or very simple, almost like what this room is right now. So for instance, this room right now has this bottom portion that is opaque, we can't see through it, and the top portion significantly transparent, right, so that we can see completely through it. So something like that is possible, right? And essentially you would just take a wall, and really it's a wall family component, so we can take any wall, and you'll notice in the drop arrow, you can go all the way down to curtain wall. To be fair, you'll notice kind of its own wall system, and it does work a lot differently than any other wall. In fact, dang, look at that. That's a good way to solve this small bedroom, right? Just make it feel bigger and do the entire glass wall. Very actually Professor Webb-esque, right? But in our case, I didn't realize the TV was on the ground. I guess we can move that up. But you'll notice that immediately there's a grid system. Now, if you want to control that grid system, this is kind of the steps that I would follow in order to do this, because to be fair, the grids, they default altogether, but then they slowly, you can make it whatever you want, and sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's like, dang it, I just wanted that to be correct again. So one thing I would suggest is to actually fix your spacing first. You'll notice when you click on something that there's actually a multitude of components in this curtain wall. So for instance, like, you'll see the whole thing gets highlighted, that's the whole wall. And if we click on it, it is the whole wall. You'll notice, to be fair, there's a lot of confusing things in here, such as like justification, the beginning, and this is basically talking about the mullion systems and things like that. Luckily, there's like now little animations within each of these things, so that is pretty nice, because that was definitely not a thing before. So like, if you wanted to do angles, awesome, right? We could totally do that. But do that first here, right? Do the 30 degrees, type in 30 degrees, see what it does, awesome, right? That's pretty cool. That did not used to have a rotation feature. However, I don't want to confuse this for today, so let's move that back to 0. And let's just go ahead and change our X and Y grid system. So in doing that, we'll actually edit the type. And if it were me, especially good habits, want to practice those, I would make a duplicate. Very often, this is what they'll teach you at a firm too. Like, don't erase the original, right? Always make a duplicate. And in some cases, in some firms, you'd literally put your initials first. That way they know who created it. Underscore, and then you would say, like, I don't know, 2 by 4 foot grid wall, right? It's something that at least told the other users that, okay, Christopher had made this one. I really like the one that he did over here. Let's just go ahead and use that. The partner starts to see who did it too. I mean, don't get me wrong, they see the information as well. But in this case, you'll see that we have some options to control the grid. And we can even control the shape or the profile. So I do want to talk about that because it is a little extra, and I know Bernardo could definitely use it, right? I don't know if any other students will get to that part, but I always like to push everybody to the level that they're already showing. So in that case, we can control the grid spacing. If it was going to be 2 feet by 4 feet, let's go ahead and do that, right? So 4 feet, 2 feet. If you apply, you'll see that it immediately starts to change. In my case, probably not much. Maybe I was already pretty close to that. Let's press OK. Oh, there we go. So I don't know why it didn't do the preview before. I'm not trying to make a prison. Maybe I don't want to go with 2 by 4. Again, this is where I'd make a new one, right? Again, duplicate it again. Obviously, pick out the wall first. Make sure that you do pick the wall. Edit type, duplicate. Let's try something else, right? And what's nice is it's going to keep the original one. It's just going to add a 2 to it, funny enough. But let's do something more like, I don't know, 6 feet by 8 feet. Something real big, kind of modern. So again, you're changing each of those family types. That way, I don't know, maybe boss man comes back or boss woman goes, no, go back to that 2 by 4. I like the prison look. Okay, I guess she likes the prison look. But, you know, and you don't end up having to do that all over again. So I guess technically you could start to use this for a studio, but it's just way overkill, right? So let's go with 4 feet by 8 feet or 6 feet by 8 feet. Apply. Press OK. And that's, yeah, you know, I kind of like the golden ratio look going on there. It looks a little bit more modern-esque and definitely much more expensive, but, you know, you save money somewhere, I guess. Now, don't get me wrong, some things are like impossible, right? Don't get me wrong, Revit or the real life cannot do this. I mean, technically, I guess you could, but you're gonna have leaks. It's just gonna look ugly. There's not a craftsman in the world who could do that, but you know, what's nice is this is technically a wall. So if you double click on it, it is gonna say, whoa, you're gonna mess up some grid systems. That's okay for now. Please don't show me that again. That's okay. It is technically a wall. And remember what we did to this wall? We had an extend to the, we attached it to the top roof. And so what's this showing us right now is like, hey, you already have an attachment here that's already kind of a parametric situation. I'm going to avoid that, right? So what I want to do is actually detach this first. So I'm going to click on the wall. I'm going to detach it from my rooftop, right? So it should actually go back to that spot, detach top or base from that piece, and it'll go back to that original line that it was. And the reason I want to do that is just because, well, I need to delete some of the mullions that were created, but in my case, I want to get it right up to a certain level. In my case, I kind of want to extend that beam across and have it die into the beam. That would be a much more realistic or feasible situation in construction, right? Not that you guys would know that yet, but you definitely will. But something like that is definitely much more doable. Obviously, the rafters are support. They need that. They can't be cut into too much, right, and things like this. However, we can get some of our beams, and as you can see, I did have that weird beam situation. I might actually want to edit type, duplicate, right, and make a new situation where it's just like maybe plumb cut. As you can see, this can start to get really difficult when you're trying to design something, right? You're having to micromanage literally every aspect or detail of something. But just in case you're at that point, definitely want to show you how to do that. But again, I like the habit of making a new one. That way, I don't necessarily get rid of the old one, or if I mess up, I can always just go back and refer to the previous one. But that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and double click and change this family. In my case, I want it to just be like a regular plumb cut, so I'm going to delete it. And as you'll see, I'm deleting those little invisible voids that are there. And it's basically coming back to the original object and mass that it was. Now in my case, what I'd want to do is that I don't want to do that void shape all again. So in my case, I'm actually going to save as a family. That way I can have a different family, one with plumb cuts and one with void cuts, right, to say the very least. In my case, I'm just going to put on the, I'd want to have a Revit folder, right? I mean, definitely start saving your components and of course being organized. In my case, I'm just saving it for today and loading it back into my project. Right now it's saying, hey, do you want to overwrite the existing version or basically just change its parameter values? I just want to change its parameter values. And as you can see, it changed everything, right? Oops, maybe I should have selected the other one. Again, I can still go back, right? It's not, of course, the end of the world. However, you'll notice that I have some different options now. I have my regular 4x8, but now I have my regular plumb cut as well. I'm not sure why that didn't change. Let's try that again. It is still there. Let's try the other option. Still does all of them. Not sure why, actually. Maybe it's because of the family type. Because it is still under this family, I'd imagine that's probably the case. Not a really big deal for today, but in our case, we could just make a duplicate as well. But for the sake of feasibility, and you can get these things to attach pretty well. It's kind of like a smart thing, or those smart snaps that we always see. So definitely a little bit more feasible, doable, and to be fair, not a bad design. Now, if I want to change those grids, so for instance, I don't know, having glass showing the floor is kind of not ideal. So as I was explaining to Jerry with this, we can control the grid system even further, right? So don't get me wrong, we got that basic 8x6, but maybe we want to stretch the details or change the grid system. In our case, you can actually click this item and you'll notice that it is pinned, right? You can't move it. In fact, pinned items are just immovable. So I'll do UP, right, to unpin something. I'll type in HH to hide it. And you'll notice that there's actually a grid that is controlling it that is also pinned. Again, this system is built for construction and doesn't really want you to move stuff around or have design changes. Those should have been ironed out already before I got to Revit, at least in a design standpoint. In my case, I'm going to switch to my back view. That way I can kind of see it more as an orthogonal, elevation view, and essentially unpin it. And you'll notice that when I change or use my arrows to move it, right, I can dial those in a little bit more correctly. All right, same thing here. I'm going to hide this one. I don't even have to unpin it to hide it. However, I do have to unpin the grid. So if I did want something a little bit more akin to, honestly, what I would see in real life, we can, of course, do that. Now, right now, you can't see, of course, the mullions that I've made disappear. But if we switch back to our view and reset that temporary view, of course, those come back. Another thing is, well, it doesn't have to stay glass either. However, every single part is in there, so we may have to flip through them using the tab. You'll also see that there's glazed paneling, but there's also, I could fill it in with a whole nother wall, right? I don't necessarily, well, in my case, it's like the wall's too thick, I can't do that. I'm going to take my glazing and I'm just going to make it solid, right? Or empty for that matter. But in my case, I'm just going to make it solid. That way it's at least not glass, and I'm basically just showing where the floor is in the view. This is something you can see actually all over the place in San Antonio College, right? Anytime you have glazing over the floors, you can actually see where the floors are actually being indicated, whether it be in the bricks or actually the concrete itself. This building, not so much. It's been over plastered like so many times. In fact, there's like concrete on the inside, then there's brick, then there's stone on the outside of it, which doesn't even make actual sense. But anyway, I won't get started on that. But clearly there's a lot of things that we can do with curtain wall systems, definitely a little bit more advanced, and you're not expected to have a curtain wall, but most people want the curtain wall in their studio house. So again, definitely wanted to go over that. Lastly, just a finer detail that I kind of missed last time is that my ultimate secret to good shadows in Revit is definitely in the numbers. So I did want to reveal those secrets that of course are tried and true that I've learned in the firms and things as I go. But let's go over to my elevations. I think I did one elevation that was at least somewhat correct, didn't I? I thought I did. Didn't I do like, there's got to be one of them. Hold on. Man, maybe we didn't. Maybe it was a section. We'll do this elevation real quick. Not a big deal. So in my case, I'm going to switch this to say like a shaded. I'm going to edit my graphics, but this is actually where the secret is. So when we were changing those backgrounds yesterday, or was it yesterday? It was yesterday. Yep, yesterday. It's in the same spot, right? So if you go to shadows, of course you can cast shadows, but then in lighting, you can control the shadows as well. My favorite is to, of course, use 16. I don't know what it is. It's just absolutely nails the shadows just right, or at least to the level. Usually by default at 50, it's like, right? It's just like overbearing, way too much shadow. But when it comes to like, I don't know, for some reason, just the number 16 just nails it every time. I've never had a problem with it. So you can also add, anyway. But that is the short and simple extras and maybe bonus track, if you will, of some Revit stuff. However, I do want to open the floor to any questions that may have sparked that maybe pertain exactly to Revit. Any at all? Again, everybody might have this question, so don't ever feel afraid to ask these things. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Another thing that you can do is you could do really any shape. Now, normally I don't teach this because immediately then somebody starts like making stars and all kinds of things. But I did want to let you know that when you double click on anything that's, that you can draw something, you can literally almost draw anything. So for instance, like, I don't know, I want to draw a star, right? I mean, I don't know why I'd want to draw a star, or a circle. I could have a circle window and things like this. You can still kind of technically do a wire cut, if you will, right? Let's go see that circle. But we can do stuff like that. And then we can actually put a glazing system in there that is a circle shape, right? So for instance, here's kind of a trick that I've learned is take the copy of something. I already have that shape. Well, let's say it was really interesting. I've actually seen a window like this in Italy once that was more like a keyhole, which I thought was pretty interesting. So I'm going to take this piece. Let's line it up a little bit better. Another thing that's really cool about Revit is this box. I can't say that enough. The utilization of this box, when you click on a certain item and then click on this box, it's still going to focus on this actual piece. So I got to say that's actually a pretty nice feature that I should talk about more. But in our case, let's say it was a keyhole or just a very funky shape. Let's say it was like that. Shoot, I don't know. I have a very particular client, and maybe this shape is like their brand, I don't know, their forte or something. In my case, I do have to break this line. So in order to break things, it's called splitting. So it's SL, and basically you just click anywhere and it starts to split the item. So SL, click, right? Go back to modify, and there should be a piece there that I can delete. Now I'll use TR to basically fill in the rest. But as you can see, a little bit more difficult than say like Rhino, and you can accidentally get these tiny little pieces. Anyway, we can make this exact shape in the wall, and I'm not gonna lie to you, that's pretty cool, at least when I figured it out. Now the next thing is I'll take that exact shape, copy it, so Command C, I'll go back to my view, and I'll make a wall there, right? A very specific wall, a curtain wall. So in my case, I'm gonna type in wall. I'm just gonna kind of put a faux wall there real quick. Another way to do it is just make another copy and change it. So for instance, I could take a copy and copy it in place. So you have to actually do this one by the copy button. So if we go to, sorry, I'm remembering also where the copy button is. Dang it, where there is a copy button. Is it in modify? Join. Copy to clipboard. There we go. So we'll take that copy and we'll basically paste it in the exact same spot, right? So we'll paste it from clipboard, align to the same place. So it basically made a double copy right there. So I'll take that one and I'll edit the profile and I'll basically delete this part. The tips and tricks they don't show you, right? They don't usually show you stuff like this until you work at the firm and they're like, hey, this is how we do it, right? But I'll take that piece and instead I'll make it a curtain wall. And it's gonna freak out because mullions don't usually curve. So I'll have to unjoin some elements and press OK. And as you can see, it did its best, right? But I clearly want some smaller mullions in order to do something like this. And of course, we'll have to delete some elements because it's like, hey, I can't even do that little piece, right? Things like this. And to be fair, we could click on each of these pieces, so I'm going to have to tab through it a little bit. I'm going to have to unpin it, and I'm going to have to delete it. I have to click on it, unpin it, delete it, click on it, unpin it, delete it. So don't get me wrong, definitely much more advanced, but to be fair, don't get me wrong, Revit can do a lot, right? But it is way trickier and way less intuitive, to say the very least. But don't get me wrong, I get the little shadow quality now, and to be fair, if I want to change this, I got to do the entire process again. I can't just like make it bigger or smaller, right? So do keep that in mind. But yeah, definitely the advanced tips and tricks of today, and at least how we can use Revit to really, bless you, to do some little extra things that honestly won't be taught really anywhere outside of YouTube, really. Because usually actually stuff like this and secrets like that are really kind of, the firm kind of holds on to it. The reason I'm telling you is, well, I worked for 8 different firms, so I do have a lot of different little things like that we go around things still, even in the professional world. So, no other questions though? Hopefully a small bonus? Sweet. We'll keep it like that for today.